Hello class. In this first lecture, we're going to be talking about what is organizational development and history of organizational development. To start off, I want you to just think about the following questions. Now, obviously, we're not in class in person, and you'll have an opportunity to have this discussion online with your team this week. But I want you to think about jobs that you have held in the past. Maybe your current job, maybe it's a job that you had in the past. Now take a few moments and write down several reasons why you found that job or work environment to be a positive or rewarding experience, or several reasons why you found it to be a negative or unrewarding experience. It's useful to take some time to reflect on these sorts of experiences and share them with other people. So I encourage you to take a moment, jot down some ideas, and then maybe share with a friend, a roommate, a spouse, a coworker, and talk about what went well, what didn't go well in a current or past job. What I want to cover in this short mini lecture is providing a definition for organizational development, understanding OD from plan change and other organizational change, and to describe the historical development of OD. And we'll do this very briefly, but I think it's important for you to have a general concept of some of these core elements as we just start off the semester. There are many definitions of organizational development, and so I'm going to start you off with some of the most basic ones and then move you through some of the more complex ones, and then propose what I think we should refer to as our working definition for this class. So Burke's classic definition of OD is that OD is a planned process of change in an organization's culture through the utilization of behavioral science, technology, research, and theory. I really like this definition because it talks about a planned process. It talks about using behavioral science, technology, research, and theory, and it gives us this idea that we're trying to shift organizational culture through these planned processes. French then came along with a definition and says OD refers to a long-range effort to improve an organization's problem-solving capabilities and its ability to cope with changes in its external environment with the help of external or internal behavioral scientists, consultants. You'll notice in this definition, we have the long-range effort element included. And I think that's really key, that we want change that's sustainable over time, change that really can have an impact. That usually can only happen in the long run. And so we want to have a planned process, but it needs to be a long-term sustainable process. And then, yes, we're going to be using problem-solving capabilities, and we're going to be using either internal or external consultants to do that. We'll talk more about what that means in future modules, but I think that's a really important element. Now, Beckers definition, now you start to see these are getting more complex. OD is an effort of 1, planned, 2, organization-wide, and 3, managed from the top, to 4, increase organization effectiveness and health, through 5, planned interventions in the organization's processes using behavioral science knowledge. Again, nothing really new there, but it starts to break it down systematically, and I like that definition. Now, Beer's definition is probably the most comprehensive of all of these, but it's also so wordy that it almost becomes unuseful. But here we see it says, OD is a system-wide process of data collection and diagnosis, action planning, intervention, and evaluation aimed at enhancing congruence between an organization's structures, process, strategy, people, and culture, developing new and creative organizational solutions, and developing the organization's self-renewing capacity. It occurs through collaboration of organizational members working with a change agent using behavioral science, theory, research, and technology. I love this definition. Again, probably too wordy to use in practice on an ongoing basis, but in terms of really understanding what OD is all about, it's great. It includes all the core elements. And I really like how it focuses on point 3 on developing an organization's self-renewing capacity. Ultimately, that's the goal of any OD and change effort, is that we understand that change is always constant, whether we like it or not. And so we need to do it in a sustainable and meaningful way that will have positive outcomes. And so as you go throughout your project in this class, and as you think about change initiatives and OD in your current and future jobs, I hope you'll consider some of those elements. Now, for the sake of this class, here's our definition. Organizational development is a system-wide application and transfer of behavioral science knowledge to the planned development, improvement, and reinforcement of the strategies, structures, and processes that lead to organizational effectiveness. For us, it's all about organizational organizational effectiveness. It's all about system-wide application and transfer of behavioral science knowledge. It's going to be plan change. You're looking for improvements. You're reinforcing strategies, structures, and processes. Ultimately, this brief definition, I believe, encompasses all the elements of those other definitions. It just does it in a concise way. So as we refer to OD throughout the semester, this is what I'm referring to. Now again, think about organizations that you've been a part of in the past. Have you ever participated in an organization development project or intervention? If so, what was your experience? Now, as I ask that question, many of you are probably thinking, well, no, I've never been part of an organizational development project or intervention. But I encourage you to really think about it, because I think you all have been. Sometimes we just don't frame it in our mind that way when we're experiencing it. Do you think of yourself as a change agent? Why or why not? Are there people in the network of friends or colleagues that you think of as change agents? What makes them effective change agents in your view? One of the things we're going to be talking about throughout the class is your role as a change agent. Either informal change agent, maybe you don't have a formal title, maybe you don't have a formal position, but you have an opportunity to influence and change things in any system, in any group, in any setting that you find yourself. But also, you're going to have formal roles as well. You're going to be a supervisor, a manager. You're going to have executive roles. You're going to maybe be a consultant where people are going to refer to you for your expertise. Ultimately, we all can be change agents, and we all experience organization development interventions on a pretty regular basis. So consider those questions as we continue on through the material, as you watch the module videos, as you do the reading, and as you have the discussion this week, because I think those are particularly pertinent questions. Now, in terms of the history of organizational development, I don't want to go into too much depth here, because frankly, it's nice to have some framing for it, but otherwise it's probably not all that critical to how we move forward in the class. But understand that OD brings in all of the different social sciences. So back in the day, before the 1950s, and even in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, what you had was a lot of different social sciences that like to focus on organizations, just from a different framework. So you had anthropologists, you had psychologists, you had sociologists, you had business people, you had political scientists, you had all these different social science disciplines, even historians, who are trying to make sense of people and people interactions and how they work together in groups, teams, and organizations. Well, eventually, in the 1950s and 60s, we start to see the emergence of this new field, this interdisciplinary field called organizational development. It started with laboratory training T groups, and actually some of the early professors in the OB program at BYU up the street were core founding members of T groups and laboratory training. So OD, and the history of OD, has a lot of background in Utah County and in this area. From laboratory training T groups, and we started to see the emergence of action research and survey research and feedback. Now that continues to this day. There's still lots of action research that happens in universities, in businesses, and organizations. Consultants use action research a lot. Management practices during that time also started to improve. So while for a long time, especially in the early 20th century, and the rise of the Industrial Revolution and automation and all of these types of things, organizations were being heavily critiqued in terms of how they treated employees. And so by the 1950s, particularly the late 1950s, you had a real concerted effort on how to be not just run effective organizations in terms of people as a disposable asset, but understanding people as a core long-term strategic asset that you want to leverage and develop and promote and those sorts of things. And so management practices started to improve. By the late 60s, we had quality employee involvement initiative and movement starting to emerge. And by the late 70s, we had, in the early 80s, we had organizational culture. Now, we still today talk about organizational culture extensively. It takes up a lot of the mind time of senior executives and HR professionals and consultants. And we're going to talk a lot about organizational cultures throughout this semester. By the mid-80s, we start to see change in re-engineering. Organizational learning emerges in the 90s. Employee engagement is still a hot topic today. And what we find today in current OD practice is that we have largely a conglomeration of all these different methodologies from all these different social science backgrounds that organizational development practitioners utilize in trying to help organizations be more effective. Again, remembering back to our definition of what OD is. And put frankly and simply, organizational development is about using the scientific method to try to understand challenges that organizations are facing, and then trying to uncover best practices and new methodologies, and utilizing data to inform policy decisions and decisions of practice in organizations, and how we lead and manage teams of people and structure organizations and develop policies and all of those sorts of things. So that's what OD is today. It's this conglomerate, interdisciplinary type of a field. It's something that's really exciting. It also requires a lot of expertise. And so one of the things you're going to see throughout this class is exposure to a lot of these different elements and hands-on experience as you go about doing your own organizational development project with your client organization. So another question for you to consider. What do you think seems to be the most pressing issue for organizations today? Based on the history of OD, do you think the field is poised to respond appropriately to those challenges? Again, this is a good question for the discussion forum online this week. I encourage you to think about it. What are the pressing issues for organizations today? As I think about this, I think about artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think of continued automation, the just rapid advances of technology, the shifting nature of work. All of these sorts of things are going to tremendously just fundamentally change the nature of what it is to be an employee, what it is to do work, how organizations are structured. And all of that is going to require experienced, skilled practitioners to be able to help organizations transform from the organizations of a decade ago, or even the organizations of today, to the organizations of tomorrow that are strategically poised to be successful. Last question for you to consider. Now, you may recall from your organizational behavior classes a discussion about Hertzberg's motivational hygiene theory. If you don't remember that, you could do a quick Google search and pull it up. It's really quick and easy to find. But consider the motivational factors and hygiene factors in Hertzberg's motivational hygiene theory and compare them to a job that you've held. How do the motivating and hygiene factors relate to how you've experienced your job? Do other aspects of the job motivate you? Do you think what motivates today's employees is the same as what motivated employees in Hertzberg's time? What motivation or hygiene factors have changed, if any? Again, this is a lot of words and a big question, but ultimately it comes down to what motivates you. Do you feel like what motivates you is the same today as it was in the past? Do you think that what motivates current employees is what motivated employees in the past? And how does that inform how we manage and utilize the human capital of an organization to have an effective outcome for the success of the organization? That's really key, because that plays into many different facets of the organizational development endeavor and how we help organizations become better. With that is a brief introduction to our module and our first lecture, and I encourage you now to go through the rest of the module resources. There's many videos linked. There's a group discussion this week that you're expected to participate in, and this will be also your chance to explore the different consulting projects that you can be a part of this semester, and vote, and then complete a survey so that you can say which one you'd most like to be a part of, and rank order your interest, and then we'll form teams. Starting next week, we're going to jump right on into doing an OD project with your team throughout the remainder of the semester as we go through all of these different elements of organizational development. So you're going to be learning all this stuff as you do the real life project. It should be exciting, and I'm excited for you, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you, and have a great week.